I think we're live now. Welcome to the Murali End. My name's Mark Machado. I'm joined by my cousin Dominic, the professor of cricketology in the Boston area, and I'm joined in London from London by Sri Lanka's premier historian Nicholas Brooks. We are talking all things Sri Lanka cricket. If you've got any questions, if you've got any thoughts, if you've got any things you want to chuck into the conversation, throw them in the comment section. And if we've got time, we'll get to them. And also thanks for joining us. Hit the subscribe button, hit that follow, hit all the good stuff, and tell your friends and family about us, because we've been doing this for a while and we need to grow our numbers. Anyway, guys, we need to talk about the kind of top topic of conversation as Sri Lankan players ended up finding ways to get into the IPL. Now, I should caveat this whole conversation with the fact that this has all happened because of actually quite an awful terrorist incident in Kashmir and the kind of, I want to say, call it a diplomatic fallout, basically a war between two countries. But somehow or another, it's meant that some of the the IPL has got postponed by a few days, which means some of the players who were there originally to go home because they've got to play international cricket, and some Sri Lankan boys are getting a first-time shot to play in the IPL. There's a few in the PSL as well who might not be there for the first time. I've got called up. Firstly, I think it's tragic. It's come out of such tragic events, but it's a great opportunity for our boys, isn't it, Dominic?
Yeah, it's a tremendous opportunity. I think one of the things we've been talking about, and it's been a consistent theme on this show, has been we want to get batters into the IPL to have that experience of high octane, high intensity cricket, to know what it's like to chase 250, right? To play a different type of cricket. And we think that it's going to be massively impactful for them. So we've been pleading and begging for any chance we could get the boys in the side. And now the two out of the three guys we've really been sort of banging down the door for, Kusal Mendes and Charth Asalanka, are going to get a shot. I'm curious what roles they play. I think Mendes is the more likely starter from day one, and I think he very much walks into that Joss Butler role at number 3, which is going to be a pretty big shoes for him to fill, and we can talk more about that. Charth, I'm curious where MI will look to use him, whether he'll get a game in or whether this is just kind of a chance for him to sort of ply his trade, because with Surya Kumar and Tilak Varma and Hardik Pandya, it's really hard to see a place for him in that middle order unless they want to kind of bring him in at number 3 to replace Will Jacks or something like that.
Nick, what do you think? Do you think we'll see both of them play?
I think we will. I was just kind of like having a look through Gujarat's squad this morning. Obviously, they've lost Joss Butler. Their top 3 has been so crucial. And I think they're pretty short of options to replace him. Yeah. I think they want to keep Shafane Rutherford more for the back end of the innings. In terms of backup batters, less experienced guys like Kumar Kashagra or Anuj Rawat. I think the other thing they might think about is moving Washington Sundar for 3. But I think there's a good chance that Kusal comes in for the playoffs and plays a big role at the real coalface of the tournament. Moving to Charith and MI, I think there is a chance that he plays because he's a pretty ideal replacement for Jacks, right? I mean, we've seen Mumbai kind of using Jacks' off-spin quite a bit, and Charith bowls in a similar way. He's more of a traditional off-spin than the guys we usually see in the IPL who bowl flat with more variations. And they've used Jacks right. When they've lost wickets early, they've promoted him to bat at 3. And when they haven't, he's come in after kind of Sky and Tilak. And so I think that's like a role that Charith can do really nicely, right? We've seen him bat at 3 for Sri Lanka in the early part of his career. Obviously, he's very comfortable batting 5 or 6, and he can bowl some overs of off spin. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see him, because I don't know what they're left with in terms of overseas players. I know they have Bevan Jacobs, who's pretty inexperienced. I think Corbin Bosch is joining up with the WTC squad. So they're pretty light on overseas players. So yeah, I think there's a possibility that we see both of these guys playing potentially some really, really crucial games.
And I guess Rickleton is going to be out too, right? I'd imagine
Nicholson's
that
gone
Rickleton.
too, yeah. So
that
they've got
goes clear.
Bairstow, I think, is his replacement.
Sorry,
They've got
Bearstow's
Bairstow coming
replacement.
in.
Yep.
Oh,
And
go on.
I was going to say Charith is technically the replacement for Corbin Bosch, right? Like if it's a
Yeah.
suppose that's what they said, but yeah.
I'm absolutely buzzed for both of them. I think I was, we've on this show we've talked long and hard for so long now about these two plus Patton getting a shot. I'm a bit surprised Patton hasn't found his way in. I think at this point, I think it's fair to say he's the best cricketer in the world who's not either in the PSL or the IPL or off-playing international cricket at the moment. Presumably, I don't know whether there was conversations had. Presumably, if there's more injuries, he might find his way in there. I think it's great testament, though, to the work these two have done on themselves as players the last few years, because we've seen, Kusal was, part of that kind of gang of three from who got that ban after the Durham exploits in Durham way back in 2021. And while the other two have kind of faded away from national team selection, so Danushka has had quite a difficult time, let's say, and Dick Weller has been kind of quite generally considered quite out of form, and not the two of them have been out of national selection. Kusal has kind of come back from that and really become a world-class performer for Sri Lanka, right? And also becoming fairly consistent. When you could, getting selected by the Titans, you contrast them to Josh Butler, and obviously Josh is somebody who's got an incredible ability to score runs in T20 cricket. But I just feel like maybe over the last 2 or 3 years, you might feel, especially with Josh's difficulties as captain of the England white ball side, you might feel that Kusal might be a little bit more consistent in terms of getting to those 20s and 30s than maybe Josh has been. I don't know whether you think that's a contentious thing to say or not, Nick.
I would say in the context of this IPL, that's really contentious,
Yeah.
Marky, because I think Josh Butler's been just about the most.
No, but obviously Kusal doesn't have an IPL record, right? But in terms of
doesn't have an IPL record, and he's done well in the PSL, albeit batting a bit further down the order. I wonder whether GT might have had a conversation about Pathum, because I think if you're looking for that consistency which Josh has provided them this season, Pathum's a guy who I would say maybe can do it slightly more than Kusal. I think the probably clear advantage Kusal has over Pathum is hitting sixes against spin, which is something that Butler's done really well. Sudarshan and Gill haven't always been the most explosive opening partnership, but they've set really good platforms, and then he's been able to stop them from losing wickets while also pushing that run rate. So I wonder if that was like a factor in picking Kusal. I'm really excited to see what he can do in the IPL. I hope he gets that chance to bat at 3. And I think we could see good things from him, especially if he's served up with some nice batting pitches. We saw in that World Cup, that 50-over World Cup in India in 2023, how dangerous he can be on flat pitches, how he can take all kinds of bowling down. So it's definitely a really intriguing one.
Yeah.
AJ just commented and said I would take Patton over Kusal. Sorry, Dom. Go for it.
Yeah, I think the big thing, too, is wicket keeping, right? Because Butler also is doing the wicket keeping there. And the gap from going from Butler to one of the sort of domestic younger wicket keepers is a big one. At least in terms of batting, what you're giving up at that 3 spot, because that's really, that top order has really been the engine room for GT. That's what they've written out. And I agree with Nick, right? In these sort of flattish, smallish grounds in India, Kusal can make merry. He has a very good record in India, particularly in T20 cricket. We saw him hit some sort of super duper 50s and 100s in that Cricket World Cup. And I think against pace bowling, he has the ability to play all around the wicket, which again is something that Butler is able to do. And I'm actually really curious to see how he bats with a really stable partner, right? Like with a Sudarshan or a Gill, who he can kind of rely on. And I think it speaks pretty highly that of him, that someone like Gill, right, as captain would kind of want him in the side. Someone who's seen a lot of Kusal playing, right? And thinking, okay, this guy is a guy that we can reasonably replace Josh Butler with. I think both Charith and Kusal benefit versus Potham from, really two things, right? Like they have another trade, right? So Kusal can keep wicket, and Charith can bowl a few overs, right? The other thing is, I think Potham has massively improved his sixth inning, but he's not as natural of a six hitter as either Kusal or Charith. And I think you can with Potham, he's a bit more predictable. You know what shots he's going to play to try to score big runs. I think the range that Kusal and Charith have is a little bit more diverse.
Also, I do feel like if you've got a pattern, you basically have to open with him at this point, right?
Yeah.
And probably none of the sides who are looking for players were looking to tear out their openers at this stage. I wonder how much the various coaching setups in the IPL feel they can improve players, because with Patarana, for example, and I know he's not having as great a season as he might have had previously, but we've seen him improve. It feels like he improved kind of year on year at the IPL. He's been brought up there. We've seen with someone like Chamira, who's come into it quite late on in his career, that actually they're getting much more out of him than Sri Lanka seem to have got, at least out of him. And then we see what other players like Ishan Malinga and even Kamindu Mendes, who you seem to have kind of improved quite drastically in quite a short space of time. So I wonder when they're picking these guys, when they're bringing them in, when they're looking at Kusal, looking at Charith, they're thinking, right, we reckon he's hitting at this, but we reckon we can get his boundary percentage up to this, or we if we move him to this, or we change this. Again, I caveat this with they're coming in right at the back end of the tournament. How much time will they get to change things? I don't know. But yeah, I wonder if that's something that they're looking at as well. What do you think, Dom?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, right? I'll take the example of Kusal. In the PSL, right, we play Kusal as sort of a anchorish opener. Obviously, he can be more aggressive at times, but in the PSL, he's kind of been given license down the order as a guy who's striking at 160, 170, and does something different than what he does in Sri Lankan colors. So I think when the IPL looks at these players, they're not just saying, can they replicate international performance, but what do we think we can ask them to do that they might not be being asked to do in Sri Lankan colors? And I think with Charith, that's also an interesting question, because we've debated a lot, what is the ideal position for him to come into the T20 side at, right? He's been doing pretty well at 5, but I'd argue that that's not really his natural position in the T20 game, right? If he's in most international sides, he's not batting at 5. So I think they might see him as a 3 and say, okay, well, how can we develop or take advantage of the skills he brings in the middle to kind of consolidate an innings and then bring power? So I think a lot of the scouts, what they do, and we've seen this with the likes of Patarana or even an Eshan Malinga, is to think, okay, well, not what is he now, but what can we make him into, and what can we coach him into? What can we and how can we allow the team situation to transform this player into what we need? And we've seen that particularly in SRH with Eshan and Kamindu Mendes.
Nick, should we talk a little bit about the other Sri Lankan players who are currently still at the IPL and have been the whole time? The boys at SRH, as Dom just kind of alluded to, are really seizing the opportunity. With some of our other players, maybe not so much, right?
Yeah, I thought Eshan Malinga bowled really nicely the other night. Kamindu batted really well. It was a bit disappointing seeing him get that hamstring strain, rushing for a single, and we wait and hope that that's nothing too serious. But those guys seem to be flourishing, having had to wait for opportunities. Some of the other guys, as you say, Marky, less so. I thought Hasaranga bowled really nicely against CSK, but his trajectory in the IPL is a little bit worrying, right? I think he came into this league seen as a triple threat kind of cricketer, a guy who could bowl, bat, and field in key positions. and I think he's lost 2 of those threats over the past couple of years. I mean, he just can't score a run. We were talking about it before we came on, that I think that's down to approach and application rather than any lack of talent. He just seems to want to hit every ball for 6, doesn't give himself any time to find himself at the crease, and I think he'd really benefit from taking a little bit of time to settle. And his fielding, he's just not the athlete that he was when he broke into the international scene, 6-7 years ago now. So, I mean, he's bowled decently enough, but I think there could be some problems for Hasaranga in future seasons, because we've seen how hard it is for leg spinners who only have one string to their bow to pick up IPL gigs, right? You look at Adil Rashid, you look at Adam Zampa this year, who was played, I think, 1 game for Sunrisers and then was just kind of cast aside. And at the same time, we've seen loads of really promising Indian young spinners emerging. I think of Digvesh Rathi or Zeshan Ansari, guys who've come out of nowhere and who've looked really comfortable in the league. So I think Wani, I hope that he's going to have, that he can turn this around, that he can score runs at IPL level. I don't doubt the talent's there, but I think we need to see a change in approach from him. Patirana is a worry. CSK have shown a lot of faith in him, and I think kind of the jury's more out than him now than it has been at any time since he broke onto the scene, right? He's had 2 kind of poor tournaments now in terms of the SA20 and this IPL. I think he's bowled fine in patches at this IPL, but he's bowled more wides, right? The consistency hasn't been there. The change of action, it seems to be keeping him healthy, but he's lost something with it. And I also think that the way CSK are using him, it's not his fault that they've been putting up subpar totals consistently. But a lot of the time, it seems like by the time he gets into the game, especially when they're defending, the game's already gone. And I know Dhoni likes to bowl him in a bank of 4 at the back end, but they're the worst power play bowling team, CSK. And I think that if Patirana is going to still be this cog for them, they might have to get him to bowl in the power play, which is something he's never done. I think, if he's going to have the same kind of importance at CSK moving forward, his role has to change slightly, and he has to deliver the kind of consistency that he has in previous seasons, which has been a bit elusive this year.
We'll get to the Patirana stuff. I want to talk a little bit, Dom, about Hasaranga stuff, right? Because we've been talking extensively in Sri Lankan cricket fan circles about how Hasaranga is the prince that was promised. He's this triple threat. Realistically, though, he's well into his international career. He's well into his cricket career at this point. He's got bagfuls of wickets. He's barely done anything with the bat. What is the disconnect here? Do we need to just stop considering him as a batter, and any runs that he might get kind of at the back end of an innings, we just take as a bonus and just see him only as a pure bowler at this stage? Or should we continue to expect something from his batting? And does he need to go away somehow and rethink what he's doing here? Because his bowling's improved exponentially since he's debuted in international cricket, but his batting has gone backwards, if anything.
Yeah, it's hard to tell. I think, obviously, we're talking about what's happened to his batting. He's been put into a very difficult situation. Coming in at 5 in the middle of a game, right, and being told to be very aggressive and try to get quick runs. It's not easy for anyone. We've seen what happens to a player of the quality of Glenn Maxwell. He's had very, very fallow IPL returns. It doesn't mean that he's not a game-changing batter. It's just that game-changing batters sometimes go through 8, 10, 12 match periods where they don't score runs, and then they're going to put up something big. So for me, I think this is something Hasaranga should continue to work on. I think, as we've kind of implied, he's been found out a little bit. We know he likes to kind of back away and open up the leg side, and teams have set fields to that. He struggles a little bit against this sort of mystery spin. We saw Varun Chakravarti kind of run rings around him when he was batting. So I think those are things he needs to work on. And I think also being given a permanent batting role will be actually helpful. so that he can hone his approach and he can think through, okay, how do I want to approach this inning? What is my role in this squad in terms of, like, do I always bat in the same position, or do I always bat in the same over period? And so then he can plan around that rather than saying, okay, well, you're going to bat at 8 today or 9 today, and then next week he's batting at 4 or 5, right? So those are big changes, and that's a lot to ask of a player. And I think we should kind of I take a little solace in the fact that Rajasthan, right, is looking at him as a possibility to play as an all-rounder, right? They've clearly seen enough from him to say, okay, we can put him in at 5 or we can put him in at 4. And part of it is Rajasthan's team construction, right? Like, they don't really have people who can come in and bat ahead of them, right? We talked about their IPL auction strategy, where they have 3 overseas bowlers and just 1 overseas batter that kind of features in the 11, which makes it really tough for someone like Hasaranga to be kind of pushed up, right? This is where an impact player would be really useful to say, okay, rather than you come in at 5 every single match, we've got another option who can come in. So I think there is something, I know people don't rate it, but he has power that's rare for a Sri Lankan batter. He has the ability to smash spin around. And I think those are very rare capabilities. He's still quite young. He has plenty of time to work on this in his career. And I think especially in the Sri Lankan side, right, internationally, he plays a key role. His batting will play a key role. And if they are to do well, it will be on the back of good batting performances from Hasaranga.
Dineth has written in, genuine question, why do we consider Hasaranga someone with batting talent? Is it just his LPL seasons? Besides sporadic international performances, I've never been convinced of his batsmanship. That's exactly what we're talking about, Dineth. If you just listen to... I know you basically set that question as Dominic was talking about it, but I think it's just feeling that my understanding is, obviously I wasn't watching him when he was at school, but I think he scored a lot of runs at school. He scored a lot of runs domestically in LPL and other tournaments that have happened in Sri Lanka. There has been moments when he's looked like he's going to pick up runs. He scored runs in the Asia Cup final when we won it, didn't he?
Yeah.
It's just he's been so inconsistent, hasn't he? Nick, you're somebody who follows West Indian cricket quite closely. Sri Lanka's not just the only cricketing island that you follow. Is there kind of parallels between someone like Sunil Narayan's career in terms of the way Hasaranga's trajectory is kind of panning out at this point?
Yeah, I guess you could see a kind of similarity there between Hasaranga and Narayan, a kind of boom or bust thing. I think the difference is that Narayan's move to the top of the order came kind of later in his career, right? It was a bit of a surprise to everyone. Whereas Hasaranga was kind of billed as a batting all-rounder who then has more taken that Adil Rashid trajectory, right? A guy who's gone from kind of all-rounder to increasingly being pegged as a bowler. This is probably going to strike controversially, but I actually think Hasaranga's got more batting talent than Narayan. I don't think that you dominate the LPL that way that he did in 2023. I was just looking it up, 279 runs in 9 innings, striking 190. I also remember early in his international career, I think we're going back to 2020, I saw him play 2 really good innings in a series against West Indies, one at the SSC where he kind of ticked sensibly Sri Lanka over the line. And then I remember at Asagiri, he played a shot which was kind of like nothing I've ever seen. It's so like I almost think I've made it up, but he kind of turned to square leg and played a straight drive. I think he's got bags of talent, but you look at his returns in the IPL now, 19 innings, 81 runs, a high score of 18, a strike rate of 92. And like, that's not inconsistent. That's just consistently shit. And like, I have to think that I agree with what Dom's saying. He's not got easy role to play, but I feel like he's kind of like in his own head a bit maybe about it at this stage. And like, I see the rest of the world, I see pundits regularly saying like, why have they promoted to Hasaranga to bat at 5? This guy can't bat. And I just don't think that's true. I really, really believe that he's got bags and bags of talent. I don't think you get Rahul Dravid and Kumar Sangakkara saying go and bat middle order in an IPL game if you're not talented. And I just think that we haven't seen it in the middle. I mean, we saw something, am I right, it's kind of similar in the T20 World Cup where he got a lot of low ones. Did he get a couple of first ballers?
Yeah, he got two first ball ducks, I think, in those in against
two goldies, and he seems to it seems to be a recurring theme, and I wonder if he just needs to give himself a bit more of a chance. You can be 7 off 7 or 10 off 10 and still make a real impactful contribution. It doesn't necessarily have to be 6 from ball 1.
Yeah, picking and choosing your spots, I think, is something he kind of has to learn, right? It's one speed, which is great, but when at the highest level, one speed isn't always going to win you the matches. I'll add one thing before we move on from Hasaranga. I want to point out his bowling's been pretty good, not great, but I think there is still one big issue. I think he still struggles very much against left-handers, and that's something he's going to have to figure out going forward if he wants to be consistently picked in the IPL. Obviously, we know how good he is against right-handers, but handling left-handers is something that he's going to have to show consistent progress with. It's interesting because, and I've seen this suggested, he's been bowling primarily over the wicket. I think trying around the wicket could be actually quite useful for him, but he hasn't really tried that ploy.
I think this Rajasthan team is kind of imbalanced, and you can kind of when you watch them, you can see why their squad hasn't gone anywhere. I kind of wonder, actually, I mean, I just want all the Sri Lanka players to do as well as they possibly can and to win every game and to get player of the match and score all the runs, get all the wickets. I wonder if, though, I've just got to personally reconsider how I feel about Hasaranga. And yeah, he is a brilliant cricketer, but he's not going to be a guy, or it doesn't feel like he's going to be a guy that is actually going to win us major tournaments and World Cups. He's just going to consistently pick up 2 or 3 wickets every game, maybe go for a bit of runs with it, and potentially come up and score some runs as well every now and again. Kind of, at this stage, it feels like it averages once or twice a calendar year. If we can get him to a stage where he scores runs once or twice a series, then we're kind of doing all right with it, I think. Mm-hmm. I also wonder, when you look around about how much talent's coming through in Sri Lankan cricket, you're like, unless he starts to show to improve consistently, he'll lose his place. You look at we haven't even talked about Deekshana or Patarana yet, but you're like, I'm already thinking about next year, will they retain him? If they don't retain him, will he get picked up by another side? Because for all the reasons that we've all just talked about, right? I think he came in with a lot of promise. I think he kind of consistently was improving until about 2 years ago or 3 years ago. Given him the captaincy now, in hindsight, I mean, there's a bit of me that kind of feels I'd like to see the continuation of the Hasaranga Matthews kind of captaincy double act, because it kind of fell apart quite dramatically at the World Cup, but my gosh, was it fun. And it was total aggressive, full throttle. But I wonder if that has just seriously knocked his confidence in a kind of much more deeper way than we imagined, because I don't think he's basically not scored a run since then, right? But look, nobody wants to see him succeed more than I do. Right? I'd love that. I'd love him to be the marauding cricketer at the forefront of it. And really, I'm having these conversations publicly because I want to kind of ignite that spark within him. Because I think the one thing we do know from watching his time as captain is that he's incredibly competitive, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think you're right to touch on expectation, Marky. I think that part of the reason that we're having this conversation is because we've had such high hopes for where his career was going to go from the start of it, right? And it seems like a very long time ago that he had that season at RCB where he took a bag full of wickets. I think it's also maybe worth saying that RR, they've had a crap season and their batting has been hit and miss, but they've lost a lot of really close games. And, maybe if they win some of those games, they've thrown away chases. If some of those go differently, maybe we look slightly differently at Hasaranga and Theaks's contributions. But it's interesting. I think at this stage, if I was building an IPL squad and you gave me a choice between Wani or Theaks, I'd probably go Theaks. And I don't think I would have said that 18 months or 2 years ago.
Well, so I think the one thing that's interesting in this conversation is what are our expectations for a all-round leg spinner who's batting 6 or 7, right? Like, how realistically do we expect them to put in that innings of substance, right? And I think that kind of speaks more to our concerns, speak more to the fragility of Sri Lanka's middle order. Because ideally, a 6 or 7, and I'll pull up Wani's stats here, right? He averages in T20 cricket 14 and strikes at 130. That's in T20 eyes. In T20s, he averages 17 and strikes at 145. And for me, that seems like this is kind of the Thisara Pereira phenomenon, where we want our players to score consistently because we have consistency problems from 1 to 6, right? The 7 in your squad doesn't need to be averaging 30 runs and be striking at 130, right? So I think there needs to be sort of an expectation adjustment to, like, he's doing fine for a number 7. Is he a number 5 batter? No, absolutely not. But part of the weaknesses, and we see this with RR, the weaknesses of Hasaranga are doubly exposed when he has a weak top and middle order above him. And so we kind of need to give him a little bit of grace for that and say, like, yes, it's a tough position to bat. And you usually wouldn't expect too much of a number 7 batter, except once every 5 or 6 innings to kind of flash. But it's brought more front and center by the fragility of the lineups he's kind of playing with.
I also think that there's a school of thought around T20 cricket, which is like any ball that you don't hit for or that doesn't make a boundary is a wasted ball. And actually, when I kind of think we're so far into the T20 cricket experiment, if you want to call it that, into the project, that we've got to the stage now where that's kind of not true. Maybe that's true in the last kind of 9 of 10 balls off an innings, but actually, if you're in over 8 or 9 and you're Wani and you come into bat, you've got a lot of cricket. You've got a lot of balls to face potentially. Even if you come in at over 15, you've still got, like, the best. You got potentially 30 balls to face if you can stick it out there. So you can still build a quite significant score. And I wonder if actually it's the kind of philosophy that he's bringing to the crease that is kind of letting himself down a little bit. And maybe we need to, I still think with Wani, it's a mental thing. Like, as in, when you give him an over to bowl, he thinks, right, I'm somehow going to get wickets here. And he more often than not will get wickets in the spell of bowling, right? Or he'll do something will happen when he's got ball in hand. When he's got bat in hand, I wonder if he's going to the crease thinking, I'm going to do something with every single ball. And that's why he's only lasting 2 or 3 balls if he makes it past the first one. And actually, that they need to, if he is, because, everyone around Sri Lankan cricket will tell you that he's our superstar, right? He's the player that can bring home that is going to go to a tournament, set fire to the whole place and bring home the gold. And everyone else around him is kind of got to support it, right? He can get us wickets, he can get us runs. But at the moment, I just can't think of another so-called all-rounder who's so imbalanced there with what they bring to a team. And that's what I think the kind of frustration is. I wonder if it's just a more wider Sri Lankan mental issue, though.
Yeah.
We're just approaching things with the wrong mentality. So I've got all philosophical.
Well, I wonder too, and this is maybe being too philosophical, but in some ways, there's nothing wrong with getting out in the first 2 balls rather than plodding along and scoring 15 off of 20 or something like that. Like, I think the analytics would tell you that a not from 1 or like a 3 from 3 is better than a 15 from 20.
I
Right?
think it's the situation though, isn't there?
Yeah.
There's definitely been some RR games when he's come in pretty early on, and you're like, right,
yes,
yeah, just stick about. Just that 15 of 20 at this point would be better than the whole team getting skittled out for another 10.
Fair enough.
Right. AJ's put in a good point here. It's a matter of time. Weller takes over as number 1 all-rounder for Sri Lanka. I mean, that left arm is looking more and more irresistible as we go through this tournament, right, Nick?
Yeah, and I think, some of the criticism we're leveling Wani about application and approach is certainly not something that you could throw at Will Alagay, right? He's a guy who has shown real problem solving skills, who maybe looked at his batting quite limited early in his career, but he's definitely grown and is someone who you back to kind of play the situation better than Hasaranga, right? I don't want this to become a kind of full pile on Wani, but I don't know, Dan Weston talks a lot about non-boundary strike rate, right?
Yeah.
And the idea of how good you are at basically not letting dot balls pile up, and I think that's something that's a kind of way of thinking which would really benefit Hasaranga's batting, as thinking 1 first, then boundary, rather than everything must go.
Yeah, it's like a closing down sale, isn't it? Everything's gonna go.
Yeah, I mean, no one can do that, right? Look at Travis Head and Abhishek this season. They've taken that approach with 2 fielders out, and they've been getting out early a lot. It's not an easy thing to hit every ball for 4 or 6. Otherwise, cricket would be a really rubbish game.
Yeah. And I think.
Oh, go on, Dom.
Sorry, I was just going to say about Will Alagay. I think you're asking Will Alagay to do something very different, if I were to play Will Alagay as an all-rounder, I would not bat him where I bat Hasaranga. I would bat him higher up, because precisely for the reasons that Nick said, right? Non-boundary strike rate, he's great at negotiating those kind of things, and he would be very useful in in a role at 3, right? Him taking that all-rounder position high up in the order, or you can see it having significant value if he can bowl the overs he can bowl, and he can strike at 130, 140. That's a winning supposition. What we're looking for from Hasaranga is down the order power, right? So I think it's a bit of a chalk and cheese example there, but maybe I'm just being too kind here.
Dennis written in. I'll go on, Nick. Before I get to Dennis,
I was just going to say a quick point. I do also think moving forward that there's space for the 3 spinners in Sri Lanka's side, especially in Asian conditions in T20 cricket. Next year at the T20 World Cup, I'd be quite happy to see Wani, Theeks and Weller all in the team. And I think that setup gives Sri Lanka quite a lot of flexibility.
Yep. That's a huge thing. And I think now they have a coterie of fast bowlers too, where they can actually have a really diverse bowling attack.
And that would actually be 5 spinners, right? Because presumably Kamindu and Charath will be there.
Yeah.
Well.
I don't know that Kamindu and Weller can be in the same team, but that's a conversation for another day.
Dennis written, I think we're also neglecting his fitness issues. I know it's cliche criticism, but particularly as a power hitter and fielder, fitness is so key. Also would help with his injury concerns. I mean, for me, it kind of doesn't matter what sport you're talking about or what kind of disciplines. The best players in every sport, in every gender, are the fittest ones. There's no 2 ways about that. I think it's kind of embarrassing that in Sri Lanka we still have these conversations about fitness. I know I say this as a man whose last Instagram post was about the donut pub, but I am not paid to play cricket. I am paid to watch cricket. So, I'm pro. Get those calipers out. Bring back Mickey Arthur's calipers, and get them all fitter is my take of it. It's interesting because I've seen around the English women's team, that they're bringing in minimum fitness requirements. The one thing I will say though with that is, after criticising them, I don't know what your take on this, Nick, but me and you spent a lot of time in and around the Sri Lanka Red Ball team loss English summer when they were there. And actually, the boys are quite fit. I mean, I saw Crystal Mendes running in and out of the gym a lot. And they do a lot of gym work. So I do think that we probably over-egg how unfit they are, though I would say that there was a couple of standouts or a few standout players in and around the Sri Lanka squad, some that might be involved in the IPL, some that might be involved in the PSL currently, who do come across as maybe not being as fit as they could be, right?
Yeah, I think on the whole, the fitness standards are pretty good. But I think there are certain players who seem to be a bit more lax when it comes to it. I don't see the ins and outs day by day, but you would sense that Hasaranga's body shape has changed slightly since his earlier days. I don't want to body shame him, but I wonder whether he is as fit as he could be. And I think that really should be minimum requirement, especially for a guy like him who wants to impact all three facets of the game, right? I think you've got to be really fit if you're going to be a player like that.
Just one more comment on this that I will use to pivot into the next topic. Who is bored with IPL cricket? Bring back international cricket. It's crazy. It's nearly end of May and still not a single international match in the UK.
There was one today, right? There was one today.
In Ireland?
Yeah,
in Ireland. In Dublin.
Is that Dublin? Oh, Dublin.
Not quite.
That's not the UK. Oh, my gosh. Why do you hate the Irish, Dominic?
There will be tomorrow, right? We've got
you're in Boston as well. Yeah, tomorrow the England-Zimbabwe test kicks off in Trent Bridge. I assume everyone will be supporting Zimbabwe. Was Wilala unlucky not to get a chance in the IPL? That's just come in. I think so. I think we'll probably be there next season, I'd imagine, if he kind of stays consistent in any franchise shots he gets. Dennis has said, just say Hasaranga and Barnaker. At this point, Dennis, I think I'm actually just fat shaming people, and I have no right to fat shame anyone.
I mean, Mark, you would not be the first Sri Lankan uncle to sort of to be a little bit hypocritical in fat shaming somebody else. So
I'm happy to enter my uncle period, but I'm trying to be an uncle.
I think the
we've
gods
all lost him, right?
Yeah, I think the gods may have smote Mark for denying his role as a Sri Lanka.
I reckon what he was going to say, Dom, is that he's happy to be a friendly uncle, not a chastising uncle. Is that where you're going, Marky?
That's exactly what I was going to say. I'm trying to be a better than average uncle, right? And I can't be rolling around with the mutton rolls and also be critical of the fact that we eat mutton rolls. So I'm going to strike a balance somewhere, I think. Right, anyway, let's talk about international cricket because it's on the kind of horizon, isn't it? We've got a big old series with Bangladesh coming up, the men do. We're also sending an A-team out to Australia in June, which got announced just minutes before we came on air. I say minutes, a few hours ago. And there was some talk of a kind of under-18s team or an academy side playing the West Indies as well.
Whatever that means. Because I've never heard Sri Lanka use the term academy for...
I assume they'll mean under-19s, right? I don't know. Have they ever used the term academy before, Nick? It's interesting.
I've never heard that term academy being used, apart from in terms of the fast bowling academy. Yeah, but not to do with an under-19 side. So it'll be interesting what that looks like.
And the West Indies Academy is it's a first-class team, right? That's a first. Yeah,
I believe so, Dom. Yeah.
That's run by a Sri Lankan fellow as well. I've totally forgotten his name, but there's a great interview with him. The Caribbean Cricket Podcast did last summer, actually, about this time last year. The West Indies were playing Ireland again. And he was over, and the boys from CCP did a sit-down interview with him. That's really worth watching from a Sri Lankan point of view because I suspect he's worked all around the world. He's worked in England, he's worked in Australia, he's worked in New Zealand, and now he's at the West Indies. So I suspect that at some point he'll end up coming back and doing some coaching with the Sri Lanka side. I wonder for me, I think I'm not being critical of it, but I don't think, I can't remember too often junior Sri Lanka sides playing West Indies sides. So I wonder if that has come about through this Sri Lankan connection. I don't know. I'm excited about it though, because again, it just feels like so long since I've seen the Sri Lankan men's team play international cricket.
Yeah.
There doesn't seem to be any progress on women's fixtures at the moment, which I think is quite not a great sign, considering there's a World Cup in a few months' time. What we do know though is India will not be playing there's a Women's Asia Cup and then there's an Emerging Teams Asia Cup as well for the men's side.
I thought it's a full-on men's Asia Cup.
Have I mixed it up? Is it a full-on men's Asia
There
Cup?
is a full men's Asia Cup coming up.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, the BCCI will not be putting teams up for that. I think, look, the politics has kind of, in a way, helped out some of our players getting to the IPL, but going to tournaments without India or Pakistan being present is not a good thing for Sri Lankan cricket in the kind of medium term, right? Because it's going to seriously hamper the finances. As much as I love Sri Lanka playing Bangladesh, India playing Pakistan is actually what makes the whole industry turn at the moment. And I wonder what kind of Asia Cup we might end up with if India don't turn up there. We should probably get into a kind of wider political conversation about Sri Lanka's relationship with India and Pakistan. Because when you talk to people at SLC, they are quite confident about how good their relationship is with the BCCI, which makes me wonder if that means that we won't be playing Pakistan outside a major tournament for quite a while. I don't know.
I was going to say, we're scheduled to play Pakistan in a white ball tour in Pakistan later this year. So I'd be surprised if that happened.
Yeah, I'd be at this point. I'd be surprised if it happened. I don't know if you've got any thoughts on it, Nick, or.
Not really. It's not something I'd thought about massively, but I think the sooner this stuff can get sorted out, the better. I mean, I know that sounds fairly optimistic, but I think for Sri Lankan cricket and for the world in general, Asian solidarity is really important. It's a bad situation. I think it's awkward if Sri Lanka is asked to pick sides. I think if they are, they naturally will fall on the side of India because, it's such a huge nation, Sri Lanka's closest neighbor. But yeah, it sucks, right? I think there was a time back when the Asian Test Championship was still going on, India boycotted it. I think around the early 2000s, there was a final Sri Lanka-Pakistan that wasn't televised. And so we don't want to be getting into those kind of areas, right?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Dennis, what a great comment over here. If we don't win against Bangladesh 8-0, that's an upset.
I don't know. I'm nervous about that series. I think that they've got the makings of a decent white ball side. I think
even after their loss to the UAE a couple of days ago. Obviously, I don't want to support Bangladesh cricket in any way, so I didn't even look at the scorecard, so I can't even tell you who was playing. But
the thing is, they've got some exciting players. I mean, we've seen what Tawhid Ridoy can do. We've seen that they've got some very good bowlers. Taskin Ahmed, underestimate him at your peril. The Fizz is back in the IPL. They've got Mehdi Hassan has been playing absolutely brilliant cricket. I think I say we'll talk obviously more about this. I think Sri Lanka is definitely favored in the tests, and I think they're going to have to. They should be favored in both one white ball formats, but I don't think it's going to be an 8-0 walkover.
Interesting. So you're hedging your bets early.
We'll see. A lot of things could happen,
Yeah. Guys, I think we've probably wrapped up everything there is to talk about Sri Lankan cricket for this week. If you're when Indu Hasarangan you're watching or listening to this, or even one of his relatives or close friends, then please know everything I said came from my heart. I really hate being critical of Sri Lankan players. I really
Yeah,
can't.
we love one here at Murali End, don't we? We're huge fans.
We're huge fans of all of them.
And I still dogmatically believe that we're going to see him batting 4 or 5 for Sri Lanka in the T20 World Cup next year and making shitload of runs.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'd love recapturing the IPL form and leading the Sri Lankan side renamed Beloved Candy.
Championship. B Love is back, by the way. Like the B Love Corporation fell apart, but it's come back. I saw a big thing on Instagram about it. If you're on Instagram, you can follow Murali End as well. Don't forget to do that. You can follow all of us as well at our various exploits. Basically, me is eating, doing what all good Sri Lankan uncles are meant to do. We'll be back next week at some point. Talk about how the boys are getting on the IPL. Hopefully there'll be some fixtures to report on for the women, as in some fixtures planned. I'm not expecting them to plan the fixtures and then have been played by then. And we're kind of on the road to 2 World Cups and, well, I was going to say, and multiple test matches, but it's just those 2 against Bangladesh. That's the only thing in the calendar at the moment, right? But yeah, we've got lots of content planned and we'll be with you every step of the way. See you all soon. Bye.